And we're live. It is Tuesday, September 14th, 2021. If memory serves, it is the 20th anniversary of the passage of the authorization for the use of military force, which is a 20th anniversary that nobody celebrates except Radiolab.
Wait, really?
It is 5:03 p.m. and we are here with Mike Pesca and an elephant in the room that we're just not going to address. We're gonna there's
Is it a blind elephant? Oh, is it? Are we all blind and we'll just like touch the elephant without consent?
Yeah, exactly. The elephant is not. No one ever asks about the elephant's consent to be groped by blind people. We are not allowed to have fun anymore, but we are allowed to play Where's the Lie with Mike Pesca. And I have to say that when I started creating the game Where's the Lie, which one of the people I imagined it for was Mike Pesca, because I think like listening to Mike Pesca spin a yarn and having no idea if it's true or false would be like one of the great pleasures of life, like a fine Chianti with fava beans and somebody's liver. But
do you know why they use that? Do you know why they use that as an example?
Why?
Because the most popular psycho, and here he is, Oliver. The most the most popular.
Scott, have you not met the naked cat?
They're coming.
No, I haven't, but I will say that it looked interesting.
So according to the DVD commentary track I watched, those were, I guess you call it counterindications, or those would counteract the effects of the most popular antipsychotic drug at the time, fava beans and Chianti. So it was a little bit of an inside joke as an antipsychotic
interesting
recipe. Yes.
Well, I got that in real time.
Really?
No, of course not.
No, but this is part of the Where's the Lie? That's got to be the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard.
Wait, are you? Fuck me, really, Mike?
Obviously, like, I mean, come on, fava beans. Has anybody ever heard of fava beans having antipsychotic properties, especially then paired with a red wine that goes with it?
Apparently, the QAnon shaman was just mainlining fava beans. I just want to throw it.
I was just going to say, how have I not fallen for one of the conspiracy theories?
All right.
So gullible.
So, all right. So we're here with Mike Pesca. Let's remember the rules of the game, and then we have an important announcement before we go into the game. So the rules of the game are that Mike Pesca is going to tell a story. It's not going to be about Slate and his former co-workers. It's going to be about something else, because that's the elephant in the room. We're not talking about that. You're gonna listen to the story. You're going to vote. You can vote any time about whether Pesca's lying. You can change your vote at any time. Here is one thing you cannot do. You cannot Google any facts to check Pesca's story. If you do that, no one will know, except you will know in your heart that you suck. And that's you will just know that you suck. And there's no punishment, the hand of God is not going to come inscribe you not in the book of life as a result of this, but you will know that you were inscribed in the book of people who suck. After Mike is done with his story, we're going to bring on some members of the audience who will today include Eve Goumont. And they will ask questions. We will ask questions. We will try to pin down Mike on the lie. Then you guys will vote again, and we'll all reveal our beliefs about whether Mike is telling the truth or not. and then we will find out for sure. So that is the game. But before that, Mike has been off the air for, what is it like now, 7 months?
7, yeah.
Do you feel better or worse? Like, has like having like not coming on in lieu of fun, do you feel like there's been this hole in your soul?
Yeah, that's exactly how I describe it. A yawning, gaping maw.
So we are not going to talk about that situation at all, except that we're going to give Mike an opportunity to address it to whatever extent he wants to and make whatever announcement he feels like making about his future activities. So, Mike, this part is not the game. We're going to presume that what you're saying is true. And
Please
so
don't lie to me.
People, if you vote that Mike is lying during this part of the show, that's
you
wrong.
Also suck.
Yeah,
Right.
you also suck.
And this one is a book of life deal. This one. So very generally, I have settled with my former employee slate. It was a long, shall we say, arduous at times process. But now the gist is mine. The gist shall be back. We're calling it season 2 of the gist. The first 7 years, consider that season 1.
Wow.
In your same podcast feed that you've always gotten the gist, it will be back. I don't know when. We have to do a few deals. I have to build a few studios. Studios being loosely defined as converting the room that my cats used to play in to a proper studio where I can invite Barack Obama over and we'll talk about policy. But the gist will be back, and I'll be doing it. I was going to say just as good, but I really think better than ever. And if you go to mikepesca.com and want to be notified when it's back, I'm not going to spam you. I'll just tell you when it's going to be back.
All right.
I'm so excited.
That is all we are going to say on the subject of the elephant in the room, who lifts his trunk and waves it in our direction.
Let's
Mike,
play the game.
The floor is yours for a yarn that is either true or false. I do want to point out that 78% of the audience thinks you're lying before you have even started telling your story. So, you've got a burden of persuasion here.
All right. Is it a yarn if it's true, though, or is it like natural fiber hemp? Would it still be considered a yarn?
I think it's still a yarn.
A true yarn? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so just in the...
What do you think, Scott? You're a philosopher.
Yeah, by the way, that's just a good question.
You can tell he's a philosopher with that answer.
Yes, I know. Oh my God! How many years did it take you to perfect that in your PhD?
Literally, it was 6 years of just that. My advisor would say again, and it's a really good question.
It's a real.
And
I tell that to my kids all the time. You're asking all the right questions. You're asking all the right questions. Okay, so I was born.
Is this flammable? All the right questions.
All the right questions. You really are hitting on important notes. So I was born on Long Island in a town called Oceanside, and if you know me well, you have determined I have already lied. Because I wasn't born in Oceanside. I didn't grow up in Oceanside. I grew up in Baldwin, which is the neighboring town. But the reason I never say that I'm from Baldwin is my family had almost no association with Baldwin. We went to the Oceanside schools. If we met someone from Baldwin, we wouldn't ever know them. And if we met someone from Oceanside, we almost always would. We almost always would know them, yes. There are 2 associations I really had with anything going on in the civic life of Baldwin growing up. One is that I was literally born in the driveway of the house my parents still live in. And we sometimes would see the ambulance that came and delivered me, and they put storks on the side, and I was the first stork. So that was a Baldwin connection.
Wait, hang on a second. You were born in the... You're skipping over an important subplot here. You were born in the driveway?
You did.
I was born in a Plymouth Barracuda in the driveway. So it didn't hit the ground. Gravel did not touch baby bottom. So, by the way, we are
hold your questions on this subject.
This is the elephant
that's the elephant in the room. Yeah, we'll name him Slate.
So anyway, okay. So, two connections. One is I was literally delivered by the Baldwin Fire Department. The other was my dad would take his car to get fixed at a mechanic in Baldwin. I think it was called All Island Collision or All Island Auto Body, and it was a Baldwin-based place. My dad had, at this point, an 82 Corolla, and it would frequently need fixing. In fact, so frequently need fixing that at some point, possibly around 1990, maybe 86, he said, this is not a workable solution for me that I keep bringing it to this guy. I like my mechanic at All Island. He's this guy named Joe. We talk. My dad said we talk. We have fun, but he's not fixing my car. And so he thought he was going to go to another mechanic. That just prelude to one day we're in the Sizzler. I don't know if you know of the Sizzler. It is called a steakhouse, but it is. We're in the Sizzler, and Joe, his mechanic, shows up. He's like a clearly Italian-looking guy, big, thick mustache. And he says to me, hey, how you like those fries? And I say, they're okay. And he takes them off. I'm like 12 at the time. Takes them off the platter, slides them down. Oh, yeah, he has a bag. I don't know. He has like a paper bag. Puts the French fries in the bag, puts some salt in it, puts some pepper in it, shakes the bag, gives them back to me. How you like them now? I'm like, oh, they're really good because French fries with salt are better than without. So I'm like, I love that guy. I love that guy, Joe. Dad, you can't fire Joe. And my dad said to me, and I'll never forget this lesson, he said, there's a difference between personality and character. And I know that he has a good personality, but I think he might be ripping me off with this car. I'm going to take the car to another place because you pay to get your car fixed. You don't pay for, French fry upgrades. And there it lay. I somehow learned a lesson, perhaps. Reflecting back, it's hard to separate from what's going to happen next. But this was my first inkling about a difference between personality and character. Mechanic Joe from All Island Collision. Cut to, I'm in college.
I'm going to go dox him right now.
Wait, you're not, but you're not allowed to.
Use Google.
Oh, no. Sorry, right. Okay, sorry.
Okay.
Mechanic Joe. So,
yeah.
I go, I'm home for a college break. And this is, maybe the first events took place when I was 12. So maybe these events take place when I'm 20. I don't know, maybe it was 14, 19. But the big story, the big national story is one that of that summer of 92 was the Long Island Lolita. You remember this.
My God, yeah.
Yes.
Amy Fisher and Joey Benefuco.
Right.
I read all about it on Wikipedia.
Yes. So she's played by, depending on which movie of the week you see, either Alyssa Milano or Drew Barrymore. I don't know. That's a broad range for
you have to. I think you have to give like the really small explanation of what it was.
A Long Island high school student is having an affair with this guy, Joey Buttafuoco, and she shoots Joey's wife, Mary Jo Buttafuoco, in the head. The bullet is in Mary Jo's head. Mary Jo,
but doesn't kill her.
No.
And that, by the way, everybody, as Scott is now demonstrating, is funny.
Yes.
Gun violence is not funny. Being shot in the head is not funny, but somehow that's funny.
There's such a Buttafuocoism of Joey Buttafuoco. Dave Letterman makes 312 Joey Buttafuoco jokes, only to be supplanted by Jeff Gillooly jokes.
Wait, so can we pause over this and say, if Amy Fisher had been dating Joey Smith,
right,
and shot his wife, would the story have been a big deal, or is it only a big deal because the guy's name was Joey Buttafuoco?
I think it would have been a top story in Newsday, but it wouldn't have gotten beyond
I think that's right.
Bergen City, the Bergen County.
I think that's right. I think the fact that his name was a frickin' cultural stereotype had everything to do with why it was a national story.
But also, because that Mary Jo, she was, it didn't affect her cognition or anything. She would go on these talk shows, right? And give these interviews.
Was awesome.
So,
yes.
Yeah,
didn't she stay with him?
Maybe it, and then it affected her speech. So all of her interviews would be like this, and so it was like a constant reminder that the poor woman has a bullet in her brain. And then Amy Fisher became the stuff of local legend. But one day, you say, would it go beyond Long Island? It was a national story, and it was ubiquitous. And one day I'm looking at a picture of Joey Buttafuoco and I say, oh my God. Oh, it's not just looking at a picture. There's a detail in the story that they met at his Long Island auto body shop in Baldwin, New York.
No, that's true. That's
yes.
True.
This is all true. No, but yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
They met.
I'm changing my vote.
And
sorry.
I look at him and I'm like, that's the guy. Dad, Joey Buttafuoco is Joe, your old mechanic. And he goes, no.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
That's what I just said.
I hadn't put all that together.
This is what my dad says. He goes, no, but his name was Joe, not Joey, and he got a mustache. To which I pointed out, mustaches can change and Y's can be dropped from the back of names. So,
and you can make fries better with salt.
Yes. No matter. I was like 12 or 13 at the time, so he wanted to get in my good favor. Maybe I had some 8th grade classmates that he could, take out on the town. So anyway, it's like, oh my God, Joey Buttafuoco. And then to my dad, is like, I taught you the lesson of character versus personality based on Joey Buttafuoco. That was the worst character in America.
I don't ever want to learn that this isn't true.
I completely agree. Don't lie to me, Mike Pesca.
Don't lie to me, man. I can't handle it. Not after learning about what happened with General Milley and the whole, we almost had a war with China today. I'm fragile.
So here's the thing. By the end of the story, you might not be so invested because I'll tell you what
happened. That's not the end of the story.
No. So I, at this point, have a Camry because from 82 to 92, the Pescas have upgraded from Corollas to Camry. And I have the old family Camry, and it's giving me trouble. And before I go back to school in the fall, we have to take it in. And I say, let's go to Joey Buttafuoco's place. He still is earning money. Maybe he's there. And my dad's like, well, I didn't go to the place for the, in the first place because I thought it was getting ripped off. But yes, this warrants a trip to Joey Buttafuoco's auto robotics / mechanic shop. So we go there, we bring it in, we get out, and a guy comes from around the corner, a guy with a mustache, and it's Joe. It's our old mechanic Joe, who is not Joey Buttafuoco. It's a different guy named Joe. Now, I have to say, that place literally is Joey Buttafuoco's place. We really were taking it to Island Auto Body, corner of Merrick Road and, I don't know, wherever the Coral House is, Milburn Avenue. You could check my Baldwin geography at this point.
Okay, I'm going to make this story alive for you and just end it at the other.
Yes, it is better if I just ended it with a lie. But what it tells me is that sometimes you get a life lesson about things like personality and character, and then the example that fleshes it out tells you it's so true, you don't really have to think about and ponder it. And for 2 weeks, that was the case. But then it goes back to just a generalized lesson that maybe doesn't have a clear and glaring example that takes away any actual pondering of the morality of it. So I guess that's my story. For 2
wait a
weeks,
minute.
I thought Joey Buttafuoco was my mechanic, but it wasn't.
But I got a question about this. So, at Joey Buttafuoco's auto body shop,
yes,
there was another guy named Joe
what are the
who
chances
looked enough like him.
What are the chances
that you could confuse him?
Population of Long Island, the 2 Italians would be fixing cars, and they'd both be named Joes. By the way, my dad's name is Joe too, and he knows how to wrench a pre-computerized car.
Were they related?
I don't think so. Oh yeah, that's a good question. I didn't get into it with them. I don't remember getting into it with them.
Oh my god.
Wait. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I'm not going to use up my question. Good.
All right. Well, let's go into questions. Scott,
yeah.
You have 3 questions.
Wow. So
one could be that's a good question, although it's not really a question.
I'm not going to use that one. If you overuse it, it doesn't work. How does your dad? So your dad knows that Joey Buttafuoco worked there, but it wasn't the Joe that you dealt with that time.
Joey Buttafuoco owned, or his family owned, I forget the name of it. It could be Total Island Auto Body or Island Auto Body. He absolutely owned it. We saw that in the paper. That's what got our gears spinning and maybe convincing ourselves that that was Joe.
Oh, but then he said that wasn't Joey Benefuco that we dealt with.
No, what happened was we both thought it was, and then we went in, and when we saw original Joe, non-Benefuco Joe, we were like, okay, we were mistaken. Yeah.
I say, okay. I really don't want this to be a lie, so. Actually want it to be a lie. I want the real genius to be that it really was Joey Benefuco, and the lie is that it's not.
So do you have more questions, or should we go to Kate?
Go to Kate, and let's go.
All right.
Yeah.
KK, the floor is yours.
Okay, so what's her name? The one who shot the
Amy Fisher.
Amy Fisher.
Did you know her in high school?
She went to I think Merrick, one of the three Merrick high schools. I think not the one that not Calhoun High School, which is the one that Debbie Gibson went to. I think they went to different high schools, but in the same district.
Okay,
but not mine.
How old were you when that happened?
So 92, I was 20, and original lessons, I was like 12 or I don't know, somewhere probably 12, 13, 14.
Okay. So there were like 8 years between when your dad fired your mechanic and when you went back to see him.
Right.
Okay. I have one more question.
A lot of salty French fries in between. So who's the real winner here? I'm going
to reserve my last question.
So did you have the this story before Joey Benefuco? It must have made a big impression on you, the French fries, because you're like still talking about it with your dad 8 years later when Joey Benefuco shows up. Like, why did this story hang around in the Pesca family collective consciousness for 8 years?
Okay, so now it's done the thing that memory does where it plants itself in a bigger meta-narrative, which is the faux Benefuco narrative. But I think either before it wasn't that big a deal, though I kind of remember that there was this French fried mechanic guy, or maybe it was in whenever the distinction between character and personality came up. Maybe it was. But it shifted from being embedded in one meta story. Oh, it's a story about character and personality, or another meta story. It's a story about Joey Benefuco.
Scott?
Okay. There's another clarifying question, so it's not like I'm not. But so did the Benefuco family own the body shop at the time that you learned the lesson, though that the Joe that was in it was not Joey Benefuco? Is that right or not?
I think yes, I think that's right. I think they owned it the whole time. Let me think. Might it be wrong? I just know in 92 it was announced they owned it, and that was there since the 80s. So I think they owned it the whole time. Okay,
so this is like a Gettier problem. Do you know what the famous Gettier problem is?
No.
No, actually, can we talk about? Do you mind if I just
PowerPoint?
No, I don't have PowerPoint. But there's a Gettier. There's probably the most famous counterexample or one of the five top counterexamples in the history of philosophy. It was generated by this philosopher called Edward Gettier, who taught at Michigan State University and published a 2-page paper in, I think, 1957. This is the thing. So people said, up until 1957, I think it was 57, people thought that knowledge was true, justified belief. Okay? That's what it meant. So you know something, if it's true, if it's justified, you had evidence for it, and it was a belief. So a belief that's true and justified. Okay? But Gettier said there can be lots of examples of things that you believe that are true, justified, but in fact are not. You don't know. So the examples that he gave were like, you're going in the train, you see a field, you see a statue of a cow, and you think, oh, because you're at a distance, you think there's a cow in the field. Now, in fact, there is a cow in the field. It's just right behind the statue of the cow, but you don't know that. Okay, so you believe that there's a cow in the field. You're justified in believing there's a cow in the field. And it's true that there's a cow in the field, but you don't know that there's a cow in the field because you only saw a statue of the cow. I feel like the same thing is true here. I think that this Joe guy really was like hiding the true Joey Benefuco.
Like where?
Yes.
His mustache?
So no, in the sense the following, is it true?
I love this.
Okay, is it true?
This is clearly right.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So it is true that you learned a life lesson from Joe. I'm trying to formulate the proposition, but like Joe at Benefuco's place or something like that. But in fact, it's like, look, you know, whatever. This is a live show. We're making it up as we go along. Not everything always works out perfectly.
Someone in the chat's going to write out the syllogism. But yeah, I like it. Yeah.
So I want to return to the birth in the driveway, which seems to me like an under-discussed aspect of this story.
I just want to know everything. I don't even care if it's true or not.
We're not really sure how it's connected to the rest of the story, but you brought it up and therefore brought the question upon yourself. So my question is, what can you tell us about the circumstances of your birth in a driveway?
3 wise men came from Limbrook, actually. No, it was just a late reaction to labor pains based on that there was false labor of a few days earlier or weeks earlier. I think that's the nice version. In family lore, there was the statement, "Let's wait till halftime." But I looked at that. I think that is inaccurate because it wasn't even on a Sunday. So, yeah.
All right, I think that's about as good as we're going to get.
I'll save my question for after the other two.
Sometimes people remember football being played when it's not there. Lou Reed used to say the day John F. Kennedy died, and he had a song about this, he was watching a Syracuse game, but then he looked back and there were no Syracuse games on the schedule. So somehow maybe football, births, deaths, Benefucos.
I have an experience like that with Barack Obama, actually. It's very similar, except it doesn't involve Syracuse. All right, we have our two. No, I don't want to change the subject, but I have a very clear memory of an interaction with the young Barack Obama when he was a newly elected senator, and it is simply impossible that it's real. But it was absolutely Barack Obama, who was standing in front of me at the line in the Best Buy, and we had a conversation as dads back when he was a newly elected senator. And I am absolutely convinced it was him, even though it's totally impossible that it was him. And so I'm aware that my memory is wrong, and yet, like the football being played in Lou Reed's memory, the Syracuse game, it's clearly my memory.
Right. And every time you replayed the memory, if you ever heard Malcolm Gladwell's revisionist history based on Brian Williams, that's what memory is. It's just the replaying of the memory.
Yes.
So after 10 replayings, that's it. You're cooked. It was Barack Obama.
Right. It was Barack Obama. And look, if I had him in front of me, I would say, this happened. And he would say, well, no, it didn't. And I wouldn't believe him. Ev and Daniel, in his proper native habitat, I might add, and Ev is back in her native habitat, which is in front of the blonde wood that looks like a sauna. You guys each have 3 questions, so you can do it in whatever order you want.
You want to
Go ahead.
Okay, so I'll be the voice of the younger people here, and taking a question from Paula. She asked what life was like in the 90s, and I will build on that and say, why is it such a big deal, this thing? Like, for me, like, I wasn't born in these days, so why is it such a big deal? Like, Scott and Kate, everyone seems to be like, wow, mind blown.
I will add to this and say,
sorry.
I'll add to this. Ben, can you're like, I think it's from, yeah, there you go. I will. I used to ask my parents to tell me a story, and I would frame it as, "Can you tell me a story from the olden days?" So that's.
Yeah, I'm sure Mike. Mike, I'm sure has a really good answer, but I also have a view about this. But go ahead, Mike, because I do think like that story was so powerful.
Yes. I think it has to do with a lot of things. I think it was, mostly because it was a time of material abundance and the USSR had ceased to be an enemy. And so we could think and dwell on frippery.
Finally turn inward
right.
on ourselves.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. That's
look
right.
at Long Island Lolitas and Lotharios. So the media was much more centrally located in New York. This was tabloid fodder that the Post loved, with alliterative names like the Long Island Lolita. Not just the name Benefuco, but the visual on Joey Benefuco. He's a striking man with a really robust head of hair. And people were just titillated with the details. And there was an iteration to the scandal. Woman shot by husband's lover. Husband's lover is in high school. The husband is, most people saw the guy and said, that guy? Right, because he was like really handsome. You can understand the whole thing. Yeah.
I just want to add to that there was a predecessor case to this in the early 80s, which was, and Scott's eyes are going to light up when I say this, because he's from, do you remember Scarsdale diet doctor Herman Tarnhauer?
What?
I mean, yes, of course.
Right?
I mean, that would say...
This was this huge... Right. So this was the sort of classy version of the Long Island Lolita
maybe
case.
There's something to like leafy suburbs actually dangerous. So this is in 92. The murder rate in New York City is literally its highest in 91. And so any stories that try to, tabloid stories that make you think that no matter how safe you are, you're not safe, maybe those that get extra credibility.
I would say, first of all, let me just remind everyone, because we just had the 20th anniversary of 9/11, that like the big story right before 9/11 was Gary Condit and Chandra Levy. Right?
Where's
and
the body, Mr. Condit?
Yeah, exactly. So, and 9/11 knocked that story off the front page. So one thing is like when they're not like in less serious times, people look to these titillating kind of sex scandal type things. There's like an affair, older man, younger woman.
And he rode Harleys.
Yeah, there's
Lorena
like a
Bobbitt was around this time too.
Right, Lorena Bobbitt, and also Trump. Donald Trump is a central figure. Yeah, well, right. So there's OJ, but just the things that I think Ben and Mike will probably appreciate, of course, is that the Daily News, New York Post, what was the one on Newsday, Long Island Newsday? Like they were central. There were certain figures that were central characters, like the main characters. Like on Twitter, there were like the main characters in those tabloids, and Donald Trump was a big part of that.
Right.
And that kind of tawdriness thing. So there's a way in which Trump's like rise, like he took that escalator, and it's the same kind of tawdriness. Although he actually didn't shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue, but there were all these sex scandals associated with Trump too.
And think about and at the time we took unserious things rather seriously. Think about the last stanza of "We Didn't Start the Fire." Hypodermics on AIDS crack, Bernie gets hypodermics on the shore. He mixes in China's under martial law, rock and roll and cola wars, and he couldn't take it anymore. My point is, it's a mixture of the serious threat matrix and really nothing to worry about.
Daniel,
yeah, well said.
Your first question.
What was the name of the body shop that you've referenced?
Either All Island Collision or All Island Auto Body. I can't remember. One of the two. And there's a chance I'm wrong about that, but it was on the corner of Merrick Road and Milford.
And if you look it up on Google, you suck.
Cheating.
Ev?
So I can imagine that you weren't the only one having reached this conclusion that maybe those two guys were the same. Why didn't
That's
you
true.
ask? Like,
Who was I to ask?
was that? Did you?
You said
not
why didn't
No,
I ask?
you cut off.
The joke,
sorry.
like the mechanic joke.
Yeah, ask the question again.
Why didn't you ask
Yeah.
the mechanic Joe? Like, oh, like it's kind of. Why didn't you ask Joe the mechanic? Like, oh, you like look like this other guy who's pretty famous now. Like what?
Oh,
what that
because when we finally saw him, it was in Joey Butterfuco. He really did work in Joey Butterfuco's shop. So I didn't want to. I don't know. I didn't want to say, oh, we thought you were Joey Butterfuco. I don't know. I guess we could have, and he would have had to take it in stride. But I guess we were all sotto voce about the fact that this was adjacent to the big scandal of the moment.
It was kind of like an elephant in the room, you might say. Daniel?
Can you remind me what kind of, how many years did this story take place
Yes.
over in terms of the narrative?
Unlike an
arc?
elephant, I sometimes forget, but I think the fired mechanic was around 84, 5, or 6, and it's definite that we visited the auto body shop in 92.
Ev, your last question.
So I feel like this story has a good lesson at the end of it, and it might be related like to something happening like an elephant somewhere. If you were to be inventing a story to have a good lesson, would it be different from this one?
Yes. I think what I would do is end with never going to the auto body shop, right? I think I'd end with, and that mechanic was Joey Butterfuco, and that shows there's a difference between personality and character. That's a real bow.
Daniel, your last question.
Were you able to walk to the body shop from where you lived at the time?
It is
How
about
long did it take?
0.7 miles from my home. In researching the story, I looked it up yesterday. 0.7 or 0.8. So you could. Oh, by the way, yeah, this is totally irrelevant, but they would give my dad a loaner car when they were fixing it. And as a 12-year-old, I was fascinated with the idea of a loaner car. What if the loaner car is better than your car? Why would you ever take it back? A lot of questions that occur to a 12-year-old.
All right. KK, Scott, we each have one more question. KK, you first.
Did you ever end up meeting Joey Benefuco, knowing that he then was at that location, which was, you had an excuse to visit?
I never met Joey Butterfuco. No. Would have been good.
Scott?
By the way, Joey Butterfuco moved to California and was indicted for like fraud involving,
I was going to say that he was like in a pornography or something.
Well, yeah, but
he
no,
probably also did that.
He did auto body fraud, yes.
In a pornography? That's like my great grandma would say that. I really, actually, you just stepped on it, because I was going to say, if this truly happened to you, then you would have Googled him recently. What has he done? But you just, when's the last time you Googled him?
Yesterday, in preparation for this.
Oh, okay. I don't know which way that.
That's consistent with the rules.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's my last question. Is the auto body shop still there?
I think so, but I don't know. When I looked it up yesterday, it was across the street according to Google Maps, but I don't know if that's Google Maps inaccuracy, my memory's inaccuracy. I don't know. But I know Joey has
the Four Seasons total landscaping of Baldwin, Long Island.
I would think it's more like Brigadoon. Maybe it only shows up once every 10 years to play in our memory.
All right, so we have come to the end. I think the audience is almost perfectly evenly split.
What's the historic splits on these? When I listen, it's usually close to even, right?
The last one, the Godwin was completely even. Most of the others, people think they're lying. So we have an almost perfectly even split, 32 votes.
We all thought, everyone thought that Tom Nichols was full of shit. Or no, sorry.
They thought he was telling the truth.
Telling the truth, and he was just completely full of shit, so yeah.
Yeah, so the audience is split. Kate, what's your verdict?
I think this happened. I don't think he's lying.
Scott?
I changed my vote.
I think it was Joey Benefuco, and he's lying that it wasn't Joey Benefuco, so I think he's lying.
I have one reservation about.
Isn't that like if Tom lied that it wasn't, like if there was a famous person, like if Owen Wilson was in his class, you don't lie and say it wasn't Owen Wilson.
No,
that wasn't Tom's. That was
Godwin.
That was Godwin.
Tom's was, in retrospect, quite a triumph because his story was about trying to high-five Bob Dole.
Yeah.
And we all went for it.
We
all thought that he went.
Someone should put together like a moth storytelling of all the spot the lies, where
I know
Owen Wilson high fives Bob Dole and gives someone a haircut.
And I'm super embarrassed in retrospect about the Jonathan Rauch thing, because it occurred to me that there's no way he would have gone through the process of trying to persuade the Atlantic to hire him a prostitute in Vegas without talking to me. Like, we talk about the stories he's working on, and I'm listening to this, and I'm like, oh, that sounds this is very plausible. That's the way the Atlantic's editorial process works. I never stopped and said, wait a minute, I would have known about this if you were working on this.
And what if he said beforehand, and to get in the mood, should I watch a pornography?
All right, so I just want to give my verdict, and we got to get the verdicts from Ave and Daniel. My reservation about this story is that I think if it had really happened, we would you'd know if this thing was still there. Every time you drive by it, you'd be like, that's the place where Joey Benefuco. And it strikes me as a little bit implausible that you don't know whether Joey Benefuco.
That it hasn't been recast.
That said, I also think if you were lying, you would have met Joey Benefuco in the story. And the fact that your Joey, who you thought was Joey Benefuco, isn't Joey Benefuco, makes the story a little bit less good in a way that undermines the idea of a lie. So I'm going to go with true, but with an asterisk. Ave, what's your judgment?
I'm with Scott. I think that the real story is, like Joey and Joe. Joey and Joe was the same person.
All right. Daniel, your judgment?
So I was surprised you didn't learn the name of the body shop from Googling it yesterday, but you knew the mileage on how long it would take you. So I think it's a lie.
Whoa, that's an interesting analysis. I'm impressed by that. All right, Mike, the big reveal.
The big reveal is that the cow was behind the cow. It's all a lie. There are two true things. There are two true things.
That's not
in
the cow
story.
behind the lie.
This is so.
Don't take the cow analogy from me. Also,
the cow behind the cow was fake meat. It's all a lie. There are two true elements in the story. One is my dad had a mechanic who he didn't want anymore, who once made us French fries in a paper bag, And Joey Buttafuoco's auto body shop is 0.7 miles from my home, and I can't remember. I don't know if it's there based on Google Maps today. But every time I would pass it, I would say, oh, that's Joey Buttafuoco's auto body shop. But we never did business there. We didn't have a mechanic named Joe. Joey Buttafuoco is not involved except for having this business nearby.
My friends are sociopaths. I don't know. I hate this game. This is so awful.
Yeah, wow.
All right. So did you think you were going to get away with this? So notice that in the last few minutes, the vote shifted in your favor. So you actually stumped the audience. You went from 80% saying you were lying to 55% saying you were telling the truth. So your earnestness and Long Island cheer and intimacy with the subject caused you to flip votes in the wrong direction.
Can I ask, like, how did you think this up?
That's a good question. I don't exactly know, but I know that everyone that I heard telling these stories frequently would have a brush with fame. And I remember the old Letterman bit called, I think, Brushes with Fame. And then someone would tell a very anodyne story. Yeah. And then underneath it would flash writer's embellishment. Buttafuoco went to the back of the car and took out a tire iron and began to do a little dance on my head,
Right. I think it was Brushes with Greatness now, right?
Could have been. But
yeah.
I do think that the hook that I got you with, Ben, was exactly the trap that I baited, in that it's a good story before I let a lot of air out of the balloon. And then if it were me trying to discern it was a lie, you would say, that's not what a liar would do. A liar would want to end on the most amazing note, not the deflated note. So that's why I went with that.
Right. For example, if you were telling the story, and I know you're not talking about this because it's the elephant in the room, but, if you were making up the story of your interactions with your former employer, you would presumably actually have said the word. For example.
For example.
Yeah.
In a Slack.
Can I just say, but this is but you are right that this is the cow behind the cow, which is that it is so like I thought it was a lie. So I believed it was a lie. It was true that it was a lie. I was justified in believing it was a lie for the reasons that Ben mentioned, which was that you let air out of the story, and yet I didn't know it was a lie.
Yeah.
That's good. It's the cow behind the cow statue.
I mean,
exactly.
So I have hosted Wait, Don't Tell Me, and there's that segment on the show where they play a version of this game. And I bet most of our discerning listeners do this too, but the lies just adhere to fiction, the tropes of fiction, a bit too much. They just nail the landing beautifully. They just have these little grace note details that are really only there in a work of fiction. Now, the true story will have fun elements to it, but usually it will be the writer's craft that elevates it to, there'll be something interesting to it, but then the writer will elevate it to something so amazing, whereas the lie stories will often, even without the writer bringing his or her own writerly craft to it, will seem so amazing.
David Botts, you have a comment for the guest.
You just muted him.
Whoop.
You just muted him.
Start over again, Mr. Botts.
Mike, it is super good to see you. And I wonder where the cat is. And Mike, I don't have a question, I have a comment.
Yes.
We miss you.
Thank
Mike,
you,
we
David.
miss you.
You're the best. Thank you.
You're awesome. Nice to see you, David. I have a comment, not a question. Tell me the story that you referenced from New Jersey about the doctor something. That I've never heard this story. I've never heard that person's name before. That happened in the 80s.
The
Scarsdale Diet Doctor.
Yeah.
Herman
What's the Scarsdale?
Herman Tarnhauer was a prominent weight loss doctor, and he was having an affair with the headmistress of a elite girls' school. I don't remember what her name was, though. I believe she ran Brearley or Madeira. I forget which of the schools, and he broke up with her, and she shot him to death and went to prison for the rest of her life.
Thank you for the wiki hole. I'm gonna go do that like as soon as I leave here.
he was the
Gene
author.
Harris.
Gene Harris, right?
Right.
She was the author of the Scarsdale diet. And hence, whenever
I know
his
that guy.
whenever the subject would come up, it was like appended to his name. Scarsdale Diet Dr. Herman Tarnauer. It was like all one word. And, like ousted Haitian President Jean-Bertrand Aristide was another one that was like that. And for a while,
strong man, yeah.
And for a while, it was Barney Frank, who was an admitted homosexual, back when like being the only out member of Congress was like something that had to be an appended to your name as though it were all one word. Scarsdale Diet Dr. Herman Tarnhauer, killed by Gene Harris, blah, blah, blah. And I think she died a few years ago in prison. Anyway, that's the other story.
Her BMI was wonderful.
Yes, and her car maintenance, the auto body shop that she ran.
I'll give you another one of that ilk. Do you remember? And Dan Flores made a documentary about it. The woman who the man who hired someone to
I was just going to bring
this
up.
Face of
No,
his
not
former
bleach.
wife.
It was acid.
And they got together. And they
and he went to jail for it. Yeah. And then when he finally got out of jail, she was like partially blind, and he came back to her. Yep. And like had a relationship with her and cared for her while she was like for the rest of her life, like while she was like horribly mutilated from this acid damage. I remember that. That was crazy.
There is something about these stories. Yeah.
Yeah. There was also that famous thing, which was, I think, stolen by David Fincher for Seven. But there was this beautiful model whose face was carved up with a razor by, do you remember this? Was carved up by a razor, Hansen. This was like a huge scandal by an aggrieved lover.
Oh, really?
Yeah. You know what? At this point, I really hope that's true, because everyone's like looking at me like I'm like imagining this, and if I am imagining it, can you send somebody to New Haven, because this is scary?
And these were only the fun stories, because there was a variant of this type of story that was super racially charged and actually scary as hell. The two really famous ones are the Central Park Five, which of course Donald Trump played a significant role in, and the Bernie Getz story. And these had the same kind of sensational qualities and tabloid excitement, but they weren't fun in the same way that, I mean, Joey Benefuco was a fun story.
Right. Or one we mentioned Lorena Bobbitt. We should reclassify that as not a fun story. I mean, this is like a habitually abused woman who's kind of heroic. I mean, in her way. On the Media did a good piece on that. Yeah, this is also one of my favorite genres. You know that tabloid story where everyone thought one thing? If you dig deeper, it's quite a bit different.
You know what?
This genre is much less popular than it used to be.
Yeah, but that's the Kitty Genovese story is the classic example of this.
Right.
Where it's actually it's important whether it's that it's not true, because people, I mean, the basic theory behind it.
Oh yeah, yes. This is the one that the woman's screaming, and they say everyone says they heard her and no one went to help her and she was murdered.
Right.
But that also, as we know now, has an LGBT angle, because Kitty was lesbian, and we also know that my friend James Solomon did a very good documentary about that.
So wait, that's been proven as not being true, like Kitty Geneviese's story? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
People came to her aid.
Oh, they did. Oh, yes, I did. Yes.
Yeah, people responded multiple times actually to it. But kind of the idea behind it is like when you have a large group of people, getting people to act responsibly is often difficult. But
see climate change.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. By the way, the name of the person is Marla Hansen.
Oh yeah, Marla Hansen. Right.
I do remember that name. Yep.
Yeah. So Marla Hansen. So she was in a dispute with her landlord over a security deposit. He came in and he carved up her face with a razor blade.
Like
And
so
it was, I mean, it's like the definition of psychosis is somebody doing that. But anyway, yeah.
How's she ever going to make rent now? Idiot.
Do you know? Wait, hold on 1 second. I know you want to end the show, but do you know the McDonald's story? Like the McDonald's coffee story is that story?
Oh yes.
Oh, is
That's
that
really
true?
Yeah.
no, it's not true.
It's total bullshit.
Like she actually like the water was heated to like 280 degrees or something absolutely insane that the coffee was, and when she poured it on herself, she was like in the hospital for 3 weeks and she had multiple skin grafts, and it was actually terrible, and it was made to sound like here is this like eggshell skull like kind of plaintiff, and like, can you believe now we have to have warnings on coffee? And it actually was a really great example of a tort case of like making a broad policy change.
Wow, that's great. That's amazing. Wow.
So the moral of that story is
I made it
Joey
up.
Benefuco is a wronged gentleman, just misunderstood by all the people in his life, and we should all revisit his plight. Mike Pesca, you're a great American. It's great to have you back. We are looking forward to the return of the gist. We will be back tomorrow. Who's our guest tomorrow, KK?
I don't think we
know.
No,
we do.
We do.
Oh,
Sam Moyne.
Sam Moyne is coming on to respond to the outrageous attacks on him in that publication that shall not be named by anybody
Twitter?
associated by lawfare. Just Security.
Just Security wrote a very hard-hitting critique, I think, called "The Humanity of Michael Ratner and the Fabrications of Sam Moyne." So we want to talk about that, but we just want to talk about.
I've never heard of that rag. So
it's a third-rate hysterical hard right publication. The elephant in the room. You are also a great American, and we will be back 22 hours and 59 minutes from now. And until then, Mike,
we can't have fun anymore. But in lieu of fun, what? How's it end?
However you want it to.
but in lieu of fun, remember the 90s fondly.
The 90s.
Yes.
The 90s were the worst. All right. See you tomorrow. There was a murder rate in New York. What was it? Like 3,000 people a year?
It was delicious.
Pop rocks and Coke, all of it.
I found a dead body on the way to school once in New York, but that was in the early 80s, not in the 90s.
Own fault for walking that way.
They left it on the 90s.